He's very tightly wound in, he's fixed on the screen. And there's shouting in the background. I'm viewing him from a kind of overhead behind position, which, to be third person aware, is a good sign that I'm in the aware ego process or higher self. And at this point I can choose to observe the situation more or try and make contact. So I'm gonna try and make contacts I'm quite familiar with. Shadow work, parts work, and active imagination are essential elements of any genuinely introspective journey. But unfortunately, there are very few practical examples of what voice dialogue actually looks like. Now don't get me wrong, I enjoy abstract Jungian video essays and four-step theories as much as the next person. But these types of education, or these types of entertainment, are still distanced exposures to the parts which live inside of us, and they are no substitute for patient and personal contact with those central archetypal figures which guide and influence our individuation journey. Today, I am going to put my private psyche in the public spotlight by showing you a real-time demonstration of how I talk with my unconscious mind. I'm already feeling a little bit of hesitation and a little bit of fear even saying that, despite having prepared for this video in as loose and unstructured way as possible. And by that, I mean, I don't actually know which part I'm going to get in contact with. I haven't scripted today's video. I haven't laid out a structure where I'm going to meet a certain archetype. In fact, all I know is that I have a certain embarrassing addiction which I'd like to lean into parts work to try and find a solution to. So, I admit that this video is going to be maybe a little bit raw, maybe a little bit messy, but hopefully the authenticity will demystify the sometimes impenetrable world of unconscious exploration, and most importantly of all, encourage you to do some of this work for yourself. I know that this can feel like a bit of a barrier to cross, but if I can share an embarrassing personal element of myself to a camera in public, then I'm going to wager that you can probably do this at your own pace, in your own space, as and whenever is needed. Quick little disclaimer, or rather a forewarning for what is going to be quite a weird video if you've never seen parts work before. I want to establish and frame what you're about to see within the existing literature and theory of parts work. At its very core, the concept that I'm working with today is a concept of psychic multiplicity, which is this idea that inside of our generally oriented single psyche, our egoic identity, we have many subparts, many subselves, or psychological constructs, which live inside of us and influence our thoughts and behaviors in a variety of obvious and not so obvious ways. This concept of psychic multiplicity has been studied and well established for multiple decades within psychological studies and the trauma healing literature. Today's Inner Work Essential is perhaps the most beginner-friendly introduction to parts work that I know of, and it's Embracing Ourselves by Hal and Sidra Stone. And again, it even says on the cover right here, the voice dialogue manual. It's a very practical book that shows you how to get into the aware ego process and look down on the different parts of yourself with a certain distance and also desire to bring them closer and integrate them to, free up the power that they hold, and sometimes in problematic ways. Although I highly recommend that you read the voice dialogue manual, or Embracing Ourselves rather, I want to be abundantly clear that today's video is not prescriptively a voice dialogue video. In fact, I'm also drawing upon complementary resources like Inner Work by Robert Johnson, which is a very Jungian approach to parts work, and also, hopefully this comes up, Internal Family Systems Therapy, which is Richard Schwartz's trauma-based, childhood healing-based version of parts work. Again, you can even take this approach somatically from a body-based perspective. Parts work and psychic multiplicity is a defining element of what it means to be human and attempt to heal the developmental woundings which are entirely natural, and yet the fragmentations and repressions and projections which sometimes are very trauma-specific. This is a really important practice to go into. In a single sentence, the essence of working with the unconscious mind is the ability to build living relationships with the central archetypes, shadows, and parts which live inside of us. And like any real-world relationship, we have to build this through repeated dialogue and repeated exchange over the course of multiple years. So, let's see if we can get into this. It's quite a weird experience. I've never done this on camera before. I've worked with clients for a few years and I've shown them this process and also facilitated this process on an almost week-by-week basis. But this is quite an abnormal situation to be in, especially just standing up. When are you ever going to be standing up doing parts work or therapy? Well, maybe sometimes you will be if it's an empowerment-based approach. Again, I'm a bit nervous right now. The problem that I'm gonna try and narrow in on and identify in on is not something which I feel like I want to share, but it is something which is true nonetheless. And that is my admittedly embarrassing tendency to spend far too long on my phone in the evening watching nonsense on YouTube at the very end of the workday, normally from about 10 o'clock until 12 o'clock, sometimes 11 till like 12:30. I just zombify and watch crap. Sure, some of it may be like informative and edutainment, but this is becoming a problem in my life because not only am I spending an hour or more every day in the evening right before I go to bed, filling my mind with garbage, which then influences my dream state, but I find that in the mornings I almost have a combined hangover effect. So as a whole, my like 10 o'clock to 10 a.m. experience gets more garbled and jumbled up, and you can imagine the consequences both in terms of self-esteem and general health and mental well-being, but also practically it's just something that I'm not too proud of. I know that I could spend that time either consciously watching one video if I really want to decompress, or wake up with a much happier, much healthier, much more naturally vitalized position rather than this slumping around, sad, apathetic morning. It's fine when I get up, but in the bed I visit that state too often. And my suspicion is that I've got a certain addiction towards this behavioral pattern that may be protecting me from something, from a parts perspective. It may be protecting me from a certain way of being which I am not ready for, or it could also be some kind of escapist tendency. I don't know for certain. I've done parts work with a variety of different archetypes and different figures, but for this specific moment, I don't know who is responsible for this. So I'm going to try and figure it out. I'm going to try and vocalize everything that I experience. Normally, for example, if you were a client that I was working with, I would be the facilitator, and I can ask guiding questions and you'd respond based on internal vision. So this isn't how it would normally look, and if you were to be on your own, people sometimes journal or they just quietly sit with themselves. Sometimes people get 2 chairs and move side by side. This is going to be a bit jumbled potentially, but I'll do my best to bring this through. Let me just ground myself and I'll try and sink in. Normally it's best to take a few minutes for this, but I've got a decent level of capacity, so let's try and do it. And describe what's going on. So right now I'm trying to ground myself by just loosening my legs and feeling my feet on the floor. I can notice the sensations in my body. I actually have my arms clutched, so that's not very good. I can feel the light of the camera light on my face, and now that I've actually committed to the process, I can feel quite nervous in my body. I feel a tightness in my chest. I feel an anxiety in my stomach that I might receive judgments from you. I notice the car going past. And this is just me really coming into the moment, really coming into my body. You don't want to have too much pain or too much discomfort before going into this place. So firstly, I'm going to begin by setting an intention, which is to meet this part who may be responsible for my late night scrolling and delayed rising in the morning, with curiosity and no intention to convince them of anything, no intention to get any immediate results, but just to meet them with curiosity. So the question I'm asking myself right now is that I would like to meet the part or parts who are responsible for my late night scrolling and escapist tendencies. I'll see what comes up. Again, we can't expect that this happens quickly. Sometimes it does take a little while, especially if parts are shameful. They might not want to emerge straight away. I'm noticing how already, even though there's a white light in front of my face, I'm getting a bit darker in my vision and sinking a little bit. I'm actually rocking as well, which is a meditative commonality. Sometimes people will sway or generally self-soothe and get a bit trancy, right? And now, because the part's not arriving, I'm going to self-guide myself and ask if there's any other accompanying visuals or imagery that I should be aware of that indicates the deeper story behind this behavior. And right there, in that moment, I get an adolescent image. I get 13, 14-year-old me, black t-shirt, black jeans, very dark energy, sad energy. And he's curled up in this position on the gaming chair that I used to play shooter games on my PlayStation when I was a kid. And I used to be very crumpled. And what I see right now is this kid who's very tightly wound in. He's fixed on the screen, and there's shouting in the background. There's a glazed look in his eyes. It's not a whole bedroom. It's just a desk with a screen on it and almost like a void-like space. Can't tell yet if it's a white space or a black void. It's black. He is existing on this spinning office chair, curled up with eyes fixed on the screen, and I'm viewing him from a kind of overhead behind position, which to be third person aware is a good sign that I'm in the aware ego process or higher self perspective. And at this point I can choose to observe the situation more or try and make contact. So I'm going to try and make contacts. I'm quite familiar with the inner adolescent. It's not a demon or a demonic entity, it's just a very troubled teenager. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm saying, hey, it's me. I'm back again. How you doing? And he kind of turns his head slightly, but he's got headphones on and he's not willing to look at me. Moving a bit closer to the side of the inner adolescent and catching his eye and just waving. He's staying fixed on the screen. He's playing Call of Duty. I can see there's only a few minutes left of the game, so I'm not going to rush him. I know that teenagers hate that. Again, I want to be respectful of what he's experiencing. The game ends. He looks at me and I go like this, take the headphones off. He pulls them down. And he's got a lot of sadness on his face. Interestingly, I'm now stroking the palm of my hand because it's quite a confronting image. It's very much me. It's not an archetypal figure. It's inner child. They might say, "Hey, how are you doing?" The reply is, "Isn't it obvious?" I say, "Yeah, it's shit, isn't it? It's a shit situation." Say is, "I wish they'd effing stop talking about arguments in the household." It's crying as well. I'm saying I'm sorry that it's like this, and I wish there was more I could do to help. I haven't seen you in a while. Is there anything that I can do to make you feel better? I'm curious that I set this intention to come and see why I'm spending so much time on screens late at night, and you're the person who came up. And he said, "Yeah, it's the only time that's safe." Saying, you mean that late nights are the only time that's safe? He's responding, "Yep." And he goes back to the screen. So I'm going to pause on this conversation. This isn't something that I'd necessarily do, but for the sake of the video, set an intention there to return to this dialogue, not ending it. But I realize that it might get quite long and quite arduous. I think that story speaks for itself right there. It's something I've noticed before. It is the exact pattern of my inner adolescent and the escapist tendency to absorb into stimulation, to numb out the feelings of terror. And I think intuitively what immediately arises as an awareness of why I'm doing what I'm doing in regards to avoiding going to bed is that two reasons. One sec. So as a teenager, I dreamt a lot, and I dreamt increasingly distorting and violent dreams, and I used to get afraid of them sometimes. I then got into lucid dreaming when I was 15 and started to change the space, but they were pretty dark from like age 10 to age 15. And I didn't want to go to bed, so I'd stay up late and play video games, which wouldn't help because they're violent video games normally. And of course, eventually started watching pornography. And this is actually something that I realized during my no-FAP semen retention, pornography recovery, sexual addiction work, that the core figure of my tendency there was the inner teenager who wanted to escape. That's been healed to the most part. But of course, the core screen gazing and disassociating and having no reason to exist in the physical world around him, that actually is still present enough in my real world late at night when no one's awake, I have no work to do, and it's just a screen in the darkness. So I've got my answer. I now have a few different possibilities. What I'd do if I were to continue this voice dialogue with myself, it's going to take much longer because it's a part that I've met before multiple times, and he needs a lot of time. Sometimes this could be up to half an hour of being in this space. I wouldn't try and change anything. I'd make a request. I'd say, "Hey, what do you need to feel safe right now? Is there something that you don't like?" And having met the part before, this isn't a certain answer, but I'm going to assume the similar responses will come through of, he needs more playfulness, he needs more connection, and he needs to feel like he can switch off and not be constantly working all the way into the evening. And actually, this bedtime rebellion, I guess, is the immature and underdeveloped way of going about that, and the same with the morning apathy. Of course, the inner teenager doesn't want to get up and go to work, go and read in the porch about some trauma healing modality, or stand here and record, or have a client call or something. He wants to feel safe and connected. So this is my sign right now, my actual practice invitation, not trying to change that teenager in any way, not trying to change an archetype. That's too premature. You have to properly understand and accept before you try and move towards integration. And that takes years. I think what would come through, if I were to be truly honest, is that I either need to make a hard boundary of not going for that limited type of entertainment, that kind of like rapid fire YouTube shorts or random 10-minute videos, and either have videos that I really look forward to watching, either like a longer form video and I look forward to it throughout the day, or I think more optimistically I could probably do with some more time talking to friends. I could probably do with more conversations with friends rather than the majority of my calls being work calls and supporting other people. Messy video, right? A messy process. I've got some actions now which I could follow through on. I will follow through on them. I see no reason why I wouldn't, and also I don't want to be in this space for more weeks to come. I hope this has been illuminating for you. We can do parts work in this voice dialoguing way, in this somatic way, and in these, very dreamtime ways as well. I actually set a dream intention last night to see if this part would emerge, and I realized upon waking that the symptom and the behavior was the very waking state itself and the apathy, so dreamtime activity is another way into this avenue. All I can say right now is I feel simultaneously grounded and quite naked in front of you. So if you stuck around for this long, thank you. I appreciate your attention. Please, if I can go into this space publicly, then I encourage you to do it privately. And if you're looking for a certain direction to go into, a certain archetype to meet with, or maybe a certain symptom to go into before that, that's great. If you'd like a suggestion, then click on over to the next video of Inner Work Essentials, where we're going to look at the Shadow King, the immature, masculine central figure, which simultaneously holds women back and leaves men feeling like they haven't got their full power. Because, well, they actually haven't got their full power when they're in the Shadow King. Anyway, we're going to meet the Tyrant. Click on over there, and we can turn this voice dialogue practice into something which will hopefully really serve you. I'll see you there.